So today we're going to be doing a clutch replacement on a 2005 VW Jetta. So this is going to be a pretty much walk in the park, very straightforward. This is going to be my first time doing this on this vehicle, so be patient. I'm going to be learning things on this, so if you see me, if you know a faster way, comment below, let me know. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button down below, and then hit the thumbs up, and then let me know in the comments if you know a faster way or how I did on the job. And then we'll get to this video after the intro. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and disconnect the battery. You just pop off this cover. You just kind of push these tabs back and it should unclip. This car is going to kind of be a little bit different. I mean, there's going to be some things that are missing on it. I mean, it's had its hands, not for me, but from other people. But again, it had its number of shares on it. So, first thing what we're going to go ahead and do is that we're going to go ahead and disconnect the negative battery. We're going to take off the mass airflow sensor connector. You just kind of push this tab down right here and then pull right up. Then we're going to take off this whole intake and engine cover. We're going to go ahead and take that off. We're going to go ahead and just hit this hose clamp right here. We'll go ahead and disconnect that. Lift right up here. So right here on this guy, I don't know if it's going to be a torque or this one has a Phillips on it, but it's not even mounted on right, so it's all loose. So it's either a T15 or a T20 or a Phillips screwdriver, so either or. On all four contact points, so right here, so it's going to be in this corner, that corner, obviously the bottom, and then the bottom right or bottom left. You're just going to lift up those. And then again, we're going to go ahead and take it off from here. We have these hose clamps. So these are kind of like a little press. Just press on the top and then the bottom of them. And just wiggle that right out. And then this one's going to be, you're going to squeeze on the side. Well, it just came out, but you just squeeze on the side of that, on those tabs, so you can open that up more. So this is going to be a 13 millimeter. So now we're going to go ahead and take off our battery tray. I think it's just going to make it a little bit more easier to do this job. So we're going to take off these 10 millimeter bolts. There's 1, 2, 3, as of right now that I can spot. Alright, so now we have easier access to the transmission. We're going to go ahead and disconnect these guys. These are pretty easy. You just kind of pull back a little bit, and then they should slide right out. Just like that. And then there's that. Same thing for this one. Just lift up. Again, don't lift up too much. You don't want to damage that. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and take off 1 and then 2. Those are the 13 millimeter bolts. These are going to be for the shift linkage cable. Then we're going to go ahead and take off the slave cylinder. That's going to be a 13 right there and a 13. So those 2 bolts. And then our next thing will go off to the starter. And then I'll tell you about those bolt sizes in a few. Oh, we have one more 13mm bolt. I didn't see this one. It's so damn covered up in oil. So to take off this bolt without having to remove this guy, 1/4 inch extension with the 3/8 adapter, or you can just use a 13 for that, but that's what I just had on the moment. That was quick. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and disconnect this connector. So we're just going to go ahead and pull back on that tab. Now same thing for our starter. We'll just pull back on this red pin right here. And then it'll slide right out. Then what's going to be holding the starter, there's a 13mm, I believe this is a ground wire for that. So we're going to go ahead and take off this 13mm. Then we're going to go ahead and take off the power cable to the starter. That's going to be a 12mm. Then we're going to go ahead and take off this 18mm bolt that's right there. Then we're going to take off this 13mm, and then behind this bracket will be an 18mm. Also, one thing I forgot to mention, there should be like a splash shield that would cover this area. The car didn't have one, but those will be a T20. And they would kind of sit right here. There would be one right here, 2, 3, 4, and then so on the other side too, but this one didn't have it, so sorry I couldn't demonstrate that. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and take off the CV axles. What's nice about this is that we're not going to have to worry about draining the transmission fluid, but if you wanted to do that, it's kind of be on your own little separate time. But we're going to have to take off this 16mm. There's going to be two 16mm. We got to take off the CV axle shield, so we'll take that off. And then we're going to be using a T40 for the CV axle bolts. And the same thing for the other side. Now you can rotate the wheel and then just kind of loosen them up just like that while you're under the car. So that's what we're going to go do. I think we need to take off the shield because there might be a bolt right behind there. Just leave off the shield for right now, or just watch the video until I take that piece off. But yeah, so we'll go ahead and start this right now. Also, I forgot to mention, so when you're taking off these bolts, you need to make sure that this is fully seated in and not like halfway. You see how right there? Then I can push it in just a tad bit more. So we don't want to strip these bolts, because if we do, that's going to be a nightmare. And then also to hold the wheel, I'm just using my hands or my knees to hold the wheel while I'm trying to loosen the bolts. So this bolt strip, so this is kind of what I did. I got a grinder and just made a little tiny notch right here. Make sure you don't try to get the boot. So I cut it right here. And then I got a cold chisel, hammered it, obviously, to try to counterclockwise to see if I could get it loosened, because I didn't want to cut off the bolt. But yeah, I mean, it's off. What a story of my life. But just in case if you do come across that, I hope that helped you out. So I hope you guys don't strip that bolt, but I don't know why that bolt stripped. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and take off this bolt. It's going to be a 21 millimeter. And then these are 18, or you can use 5/8. So this was kind of stuck. I had to wiggle it back and forth just to get it out. I believe this guy's stuck too. I don't know if that's supposed to come off too, but oh well. Don't care about that piece. Now we're going to go ahead and take off the lower threes. There's going to be one right here, one right there, and then one where are my fingers at. It's going to be right here. Those are going to be all 5/8. Take off that bolt. Totally forgot about that one. So once we take off this one, this should separate pretty easy. So we're going to go ahead and take off that one. Totally forgot about that. And then for that bolt, it's actually going to be a 16 millimeter. Alright, so this is how our setup's going to be. Make sure you try to get on the flattest surface on the transmission, and the same thing for the oil pan. There's another method that's recommended by the dealership. I'm going by this. I'm not responsible for your oil pan getting damaged, but I am going to do it this way. So just take precaution if you do it this way. Your pan might get damaged. So the proper way is to support the engine from right here, one of the brackets. And there should have been another bracket around here, but I didn't see it. But I did see it on the Protoman. And then this would be the tool that you would be using. That would be the engine stand to hold it from up top. So you would put one right here, like these guys right here. So you would set one right here, and then one on the other side, and then you can use the chains to go through that. You can get those at Harbor Freight for like 80 bucks, $90. So the last few things that we're going to go ahead and do, we're going to go ahead and take off these last two 18 millimeter bolts that are right there. So 1 and 2. And then we're going to go ahead and take off these other 18 millimeter bolts. 1, 2. So once you get these guys off, the tranny will drop. So just so you know that. So now we're going to go ahead and go from there and then disconnect it from here. Alright, so now we're ready to go ahead and lower the transmission. Oh wait, before we do that, I would recommend you to take off this connector. Now you're just going to kind of put one finger on both sides just like that. Just wiggle it back and forth. And then it comes out like that, just in case so we don't have it break. Then now we're ready to drop down the tranny. So now we're going to go ahead and lower the tranny. And as we're lowering it, we're going to go ahead and split the casing from right here. Alright, so coming from the driver's side, there's going to be 3 bolts. So there's going to be 3 bolts. There's one that I already taken off, and then where those 2 bolt holes, we're going to take off those 2. Those are going to be 16 millimeters, and remember, you're just going to take off 3 so we can take off that transmission bracket. Now we're just going to pull back this bolt. And then we're going to go up on top and then pull out the mount or the bracket. So now that we have this guy, should drop easier. We'll have more clearance to pull it out now. Alright, so I finally dropped down the transmission, but I thought I was recording, which I wasn't. Phone cut out, so sorry I couldn't show that. It's a bummer, but I'm going to tell you what I struggled with, because this thing was a pain in the butt, and gets a little bit catchy. If you don't have the CV axles in a certain way, then the transmission won't come out. So I'm going to show you right now where the CV axle needs to be on the driver's side. The passenger doesn't really matter, but we'll go ahead and get to that right now. I had to lower down the motor, but right here, see how I had to lift up the CV axle? Well, actually, it needs to be more back there so it doesn't get in the way. And then, right here, on the passenger side CV axle, it was actually catching against right up there, which was preventing it from coming out. So, that made it more difficult, which is more of a pain in the butt. And then I had to, obviously we had to take off the bracket. I showed that, so. Whoo! What a workout. I didn't use the jack. I didn't use the jack for that part. I just did everything by hand. I kind of used my knees a little bit just to, get most of the weight. But once it landed, just kind of slide down my knees away from the transmission and let it rest on my body, and then just kind of push it over to the side of where you kind of saw where it was at. Now, if you don't have enough room, if it's not high in the air, it's not going to work out. So just make sure that you have it pretty high. Not too high, obviously, where enough where your jacks can be. But I wish I could have recorded that process so you could saw, but honestly, it was a struggle getting it out. Just like I said, it's my first time doing it, so for next time, I know what technique to use, so we'll go ahead and do that. Now we're going to go ahead and do with the other parts. I'm going to go ahead and clean out the transmission, get it all cleaned up, and then order the parts and get it for R&R. So, alright, so now we're going to go ahead and take off the pressure plate bolts. There's going to be 9 of them, and basically you're going to need a special type of tool just to take off these ones. You can't use the T's or else you strip them. So this is going to be a 12-point like star. I think these are called XYZ sockets. The part number for this one is 70070, and you can buy the whole set from AutoZone. I think it's just like for $20 or $29. I don't remember. I got this a while ago for another job. So then you're going to go ahead and pry back between the lips with the flathead or a pry bar. Yeah, this disc is done. Yeah, there ain't no meat on this disc. So now we're going to go ahead and take off our pressure plate. And we're going to be using the 12. Remember, this is the same as the pressure plate, so this is going to be a 12-point. Now we're going to go ahead and drop off or pull out the pressure plate. So we got to pry against this if it doesn't want to come off. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and put on this plate. Now, there's only one way it should go. This little tiny knot should correspond with this. But before putting on that, make sure that this area is very, very clean. And that there's no debris on it. Because this will give a signal to your computer on when to ignite or spark on the ignition timing or to send fuel. So we'll go ahead and align this guy right there. And it'll set in just like that. So now it's in a flat surface. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and install our flywheel. Now remember, the bolt pattern is a little bit different. So this is only pretty much going to go in one way. So then we're going to go ahead and thread in our bolts. Now make sure you put blue Loctite on just the tips, not the whole thing. And then we're going to go ahead and torque it down to 22 foot-pounds for the first pass. The second pass is going to be 44. And then additional 90 degrees after you go on your second pass. So after you get it torqued down all the bolts to 44 degrees, you're going to make a mark. I would do it at the top. And then obviously you're going to have to torque it to 90 degrees. And then that's going to be half of 180. So that's going to be right here in the middle. So once you're going to mark it with whiteout, it's very easy to see. Then once you get it to right here, where the white mark's going to move right here, that's how you know it's torqued down 90 degrees. So right there, I just marked this one. I'm just showing you just on one bolt. It's because I have a torque angle, torque wrench. So I'm just showing you with just the white out. So basically, right here, that's going to be our 0 point. And then right here, on the halfway mark, this is going to be our 90 degrees. And then right below it, that'll be our 180. So we want it right there. I'm just trying to be as thorough as possible, so just in case some people don't get it, and then I know a lot of other people might get it, some might not get it, so just want to make sure I'm very detailed on that. Alright, so basically we got the flywheel all torqued down. So there you go. Kind of using my angle torque wrench. There's no way to... I know I wasn't getting like a correct position. So I did the first one, like I tightened that one. And then I noticed that the whole motor and the whole motor was lifting up with the flywheel. I mean, everything was just like lifting up, and then the degrees were going off. So I went ahead and backed this guy off and just made my marks, and then obviously just went off by my marks. But as you can see right there, I have everything at my 90 degrees. And one way I did was I locked this flywheel was I had like just a regular socket that held it in. I didn't use the OEM bolt. I got an extended bolt, and then I used a deep socket. Was that 19 millimeter deep socket? And I believe that was like a 21 or 22 socket. It doesn't really matter on the socket, but this came through. This helped out a lot. So thanks, Alex. Shout out to Alejandro for giving me that little technique instead of losing time on ordering a special tool on that. So I learned something new today. But yeah, so we're gonna go ahead and put on the pressure plate. But before we do that, I'm just gonna make sure that you know. So always go in an opposite pattern. So when you torque these down, so go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So just like that. And then pretty much the same thing for this pressure plate too. We're just gonna go on opposite sides. So 1, 2. You can go like this. So 1 right here, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then obviously 8 and 9. So basically opposite of each other. So I'll do like the first two just right here, these guys, and just skip the middle one. So that's that. And make sure, obviously, you're going to use blue Loctite on the pressure plate, and then make sure you clean your surface for both sides too as well with a brake cleaner. So when putting on the pressure plate or the clutch disc, you need to make sure that the grooved part is going to be on this part, so the one that's indented, and the one that has the top hat is going to be going towards the flywheel. So we're going to go ahead and put this on right now. Slide it right in there. So I guess we're going to have to put the clutch disc with the pressure plate. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and put on our pressure plate flywheel. Again, so what you're going to want to do is torque these down to about 12 or 13 foot-pounds max. Nothing more than that. It said torque it down to 15 foot-pounds, but the bolts were snapping. So I just left it as that. I don't know, it's probably because I am reusing the bolts. So I think that has to take effect into it too. But again, we're going to just go ahead and torque them down to 12 foot-pounds by using blue Loctite. And also make sure that the inner dent right here, that it's facing like this top hat, is like, it has like a nice little groove for it. So the top hat, this piece right here, is going to be going towards the flywheel. Alright, so we got the transmission all cleaned up and everything. As I was pressure washing it, the release bearing flew right off. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're just going to go ahead and pull right back. Just like that. So just lean it right back. Then we need to clean this area for any debris on it. So you can use like a degreaser, and then make sure you clean up the surface area for this. So we're going to go ahead and clean up that area. And then clean up this guy too. I would use brake cleaner and a rag just for the most part. And then once I'm done with that, we'll get right back to this. Alright, so we got this guy all cleaned up. Now what we're going to go ahead and do is lubricate our contacting points. So with our clutch, it came with this little bag for the little lubricant. So one, we can either lubricate right here, right now, or we can do that later. A little bit goes a long way, so you don't need to use the whole thing on this. And you just kind of want to rub it right in there, just like that. That's already being a lot as it is. And same thing for right there. I just put the dab, and then I'll just go ahead and go over with my finger from whatever leftover that I had. And then this guy, we're going to go ahead and insert it just like that. I think turn it. Oh no. So we're just going to go ahead and insert it the way how it is. So just like that. That's how we're going to have it. Now, I'm just going to use... You don't need to lubricate this part, but I'm just doing like a light mist. I mean a very, very light. And then we're going to go ahead and push this guy against that. We can put this in last. So there we have it. So now that's installed. We're going to go ahead and lubricate our splines. Now you do not want to overkill it on the lubricating. So there you have it. Let's get that to focus. So just like that, you don't want a lot. You don't want it too crazy, but we're gonna go ahead and fill up our little spots that I missed out. And then, yeah, but then we're pretty much ready for the install. Alright, so I'm going to try to record this to the best of my abilities on putting in the transmission. I am going to try to do it in by hand first and see, hopefully that works out. Alright, so we got the tranny all bolted down. I will show how I did that. So I had to take off the CV axle for the passenger. Obviously, I think I did mention that in the video. I can't remember. But while this motor and the transmission are kind of lowered just a little bit, you need to put this guy back in place, and then you can go ahead and lift it back up. I still have the driver's side CV axle. That's the one that I took off, not the passenger. But now as for this, we're going to have to move, just kind of push your jack or get a pry bar to move the transmission forward or backwards. So I just push the jack right now, and then you'll just thread it in by hand. So I want to give a little bit update of how I got the CV axle. I didn't show that process just because it's going to be a little bit simple. So there's going to be 3 bolts that are going to be bolted to the lower control arm. Those 3 bolts are going to be 16 millimeters. Just go ahead and loosen that up. Then between this and the lower control arm, you're going to get a pry bar and just pick right at it, so you lift it up. If you need to, you can push this down a little bit, and then, but this should lift up, And then when you're gonna go ahead and put in the CV axle, you're gonna put in that rear first. So you're gonna slide it in just this way between the sway bar end link and then the shock. So you're gonna slide it right in there. Make sure it goes inside there first, and then slide it right back into the hub. And then you might need to clean it out because this was a little bit kind of hard to go in. And then once it got enough meat inside there, I was able to thread it on, and then I used the impact to bring it right back in. So basically, we're gonna go ahead and put this guy right back on. So we'll just push and then lower this guy with our hands, and then we'll go ahead and get back to the rest. And then I'm not gonna show the bolting procedure, but I will show step by step of what I have done. Alright, so basically the way how we're gonna put on this CV axle is gonna be the same that we're gonna put it on the driver's side. I'm just gonna show this side because it's a lot more easier to demonstrate. So don't forget that, make sure that your gasket's still in place. So we're gonna go ahead and slide this right back. Now, we're going to go ahead and make sure our bolts line up with our grooves, screw holes. And once they're pretty much lining up, we'll go ahead and seat them in. And by the way, I know earlier I was using a T, but you're actually supposed to be using one of the 12-point star ones. So this one's the 8mm. So we'll go ahead and start threading those in. So once you got all these bolts tightened down, now you want to make sure you tighten these down pretty significantly. So you're gonna have to hold the wheel down while you're trying to tighten these bolts down. So you're just gonna lock it with your feet or have someone else hold it while you're tightening these bolts. So just gonna kind of give a little update. So we got the CV axle boot shield. We got that on, both 16mm bolts just in case. And then we got the torque strut mount. I kind of used my knee, like kind of pushing against the oil filter cap housing to guide in the bolts. But I put in this guy first inside, and then I went ahead and bolted this guy first, and then I went ahead and bolted these guys last. CV axles are bolted down. Gonna put down the tire. Don't forget about this bolt. That one for the mating of the transmission and the motor. So just make sure you have 4 of those bolts. Next thing you know, we're gonna go ahead and put on the starter. Don't forget this connector to put it back in its original position. Yeah, and then pretty much update you as I go. Alright, so we got the starter bolted on. So we first put in the long bolt, and then we put on the ground cable. make sure it goes under this guy and not over. And so, well, then we'll go ahead and bolt it with the other nut. And then same thing for the bottom. Make sure you do the same thing. Put the bracket too as well. Now for the rest of this part, I'm gonna go ahead and record that process, but I'm not gonna really talk about it unless if I really need to. But pretty much this is gonna be a fast forward process. Alright, so I'm going to be putting in a new master cylinder. This is kind of going to disregard you, so unless if you're putting in a new master cylinder, then you would worry about this. But I will show this that I'm installing it. So if you are going to bleed it, I think you need to pump the clutch pedal 15 to 20 times as fast, like pretty fast. That's what the Mitchell on Demand was saying. And then I would use like a brake line hose or something for it to go into a reservoir to catch that fluid so you don't make a mess, because you don't want to dirty your area. And yeah, just keep bleeding till it gets pretty hard. I'm going to kind of talk about the clutch bleed on this procedure if you are going to be doing it. Make sure that your reservoir on your brake master cylinder is kind of full. That's above the nipple for the slave cylinder and the clutch slave cylinder. I mean the clutch slave cylinder and then the clutch cylinder. So when you're bleeding this, you need to open a little bit more than what you should until fluid starts coming out. So I would kind of open it a little bit and nothing would come out. So I would open it until fluid came out while holding the clutch down, and then fluid finally came out. Now you need to make sure that you have like a rag that's blocking off over this area so it's not going over until the clutch area. You just want to try to be as clean as possible. Put a rag under here and put a rag above here if you're not using a kind of like a bleed line. And then when you're gonna close it, make sure you close it all the way. So I hope that helps out. And then again, we're gonna go ahead and fast forward through the whole process when I'm